So welcome back to our channel, guys. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Ali.
And we're two dentists working in London, and on this channel we make videos about everything dentistry. So if you're into that, make sure you like and subscribe.
Today we're going to be comparing loupes from Oroscoptic, Univet and Brian, and we're going to assess them in three main categories: their comfort, their optics and their light. At the end of the video we're going to give you our final verdict on which set of loupes we think you should buy, so make sure you watch till the end.
We've also reached out to all the companies to make sure you guys are getting the best deals possible. So check out the links in the description to get in touch with your local reps. Some of these will be providing unique discounts just for you guys, so make sure you mention two dentists when you speak to them.
So the three loupes we've chosen to compare are 3.5 times magnification prismatic loupes, because we think that's what the best starting point for a dentist buying their first set of loupes is.
Some loupes companies will tell you to start with a low magnification like 2.5, especially if you're a student. But to be honest, we think everyone will be able to adjust to 3.5 fairly quickly. So there's no point in starting at 2.5 and then paying a second time to upgrade to 3.5 after a few years.
Now there are mainly two types of loupes to choose from, and they are Galilean or prismatic loupes. Galilean range from 2 times mag and go up to 3 or 3.5 times mag. Prismatic loupes usually start at 3.5 and go up higher to as high as 7.5. The difference is, of course, the magnification, but also the weight of the optics and how wide the area you can see is.
So we think dentists should go for 3.5 prismatics as a perfect starting point, but other dental professionals who don't require high magnification may want to consider 2.5 Galileans as they're much lighter and easier to use.
From Oroscoptic, we chose the XV1 wireless loupes, which I've been using for 3 years.
And for Univet, we chose the trendy frame with the wired EOS HP light, which I've been using for about 3 years now. And from Brian, we have the 3.5 magnification loupes with the wireless Ignis light. We chose these specific loupes because they're the ones that we would choose if we were to buy loupes for the first time from these companies.
So first, let's start with comfort. We put this category first because we think it's one of the most important ones. Loupes are something that you'll be wearing for many hours in a day, so it's important you find ones that are comfortable for you.
The only statistical test in this category we did was to weigh each set of loupes. Univet had the lightest set of loupes, but keep in mind it's the only one with a wired light. Bright was second and Oroscoptic was the heaviest one. But this weight doesn't really mean much because how heavy a set of loupes feel is dependent on the design of the nose pad and the balance of the loupes on your head.
All three loupes we compared were generally comfortable, but each one had their differences. We both really liked the comfort of the Bryant loupes. When you wear them, they feel the lightest, and we think that's because of the weight of the Ignis light, making the loupes feel back heavy and taking the pressure off the nose. However, we did have a split opinion about the magnetic head strap.
I personally really like the magnetic strap because it was quick and easy and reproducible. And I prefer it to the braided straps that come with other loupes because it's plastic and I can easily wipe it, whereas I don't feel as comfortable with the braided straps because I don't feel like they get cleaned as well.
But for me, the magnetic strap didn't feel like it secured the loupes in place as well as the traditional straps could, because it wasn't as easily adjustable. This is just how I felt about it, but then you have Zoe here who didn't really mind it. And again, this is just my personal opinion, where I prefer the traditional head straps more.
Now, the Oroscoptic loupes have a very interesting design and are similar to the Bryant loupes where they have the batteries at the back. In this case, they feel very balanced and not back heavy at all. But we also had a split decision on the overall comfort.
I've been wearing the XV1s for the last 3 years and I find them really comfortable. They're really well balanced because the wireless light counters the weight of the telescopes at the front. The nose piece is a soft rubber material too, so even after a long 2-hour appointment, I don't really feel any pressure on my nose.
However, for me, I've never been able to get used to the frame of the XV1s. I had tried them a few years ago when I was trying to decide which loupes to buy, and I found that they apply pressure to the area just in front of my ears. Trying the loupes on now, I still feel the same pressure, and it's worse when I tighten them as well.
And although I find these frames really comfortable, when I'm doing clinical stuff, one of the worst things about these frames is that I never really feel comfortable having a conversation with my patient with them on. I just feel like there isn't enough space between the top of the telescope and the top of the frames for my eyes to comfortably look at the patient without half my vision being obscured by the telescope. Whereas this really wasn't an issue with the Univet loupes, and it was even less of an issue with the Bryant loupes because I felt I had so much more space.
So we think if you're thinking of getting the XV1s, just try them on with your Oroscoptic rep, and if the frame feels comfortable for you, then this is nothing to worry about. Now, the Univet loupes are amazing loupes and they look great, but unfortunately one of the only downfalls is their comfort. As they have a wired light, there isn't anything to balance out the front optics, and they do feel quite front heavy. We both found that they apply quite a lot of pressure on the nose. When you initially wear them, it's not an issue, but after a 1 or 2 hour appointment, you can start to feel it, and especially when you take them off. And this could just be because of the shapes of our noses, so do make sure you try them out with your local Univet rep. We also know that they have a different frame with different nose pads, which look a lot more comfortable. So again, this might not be a deal breaker.
Before we move on to the next section, we'd really appreciate if you guys gave this video a like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more people. Thank you.
So let's get onto the optics of the loupes. In this category, we tested three things: the field of view, the depth of focus, and the overall clarity. Now, when you look through a pair of prismatic loupes, you should see a circle with a dark black background around the edges. The diameter of this circle is what we call the field of view. Basically, how wide or how big is the circle you're seeing through, and it's measured in centimeters.
The depth of focus is how much leeway you have to move your head back and forth and still be in focus. This is measured in centimeters also. The problem with measuring these is, from my understanding, both the field of view and the depth of focus changes depending on the working distance of the loupes.
Before one of these companies makes you bespoke loupes, they will sit you down and measure your ideal working distance and make the loupes to that measurement. We wanted to make sure our comparisons were reasonably fair, so we measured the working distance of all these three loupes, and luckily they were all around 44 centimeters.
To measure the depth of focus, we looked at a tooth model and measured the point at which the teeth came into focus and then continued moving the tooth model away until it went back out of focus. Oroscoptic and Bryant were 9 centimeters and Univet was 12 centimeters. This number is basically how many centimeters you can move your head, or the patient can move their mouth, and the teeth will still be in focus. The numbers we have here may be slightly different from what the companies advertise, but truthfully, it's most likely because of the differences of how we carry out our tests. Keep in mind, we're just comparing by doing the same test the same way for every loupe. Our tests may not be the most accurate, but we both did repeat tests independently and found consistent results.
For field of view, we set out a photo of a grid on our laptop and placed the laptop 44 centimeters away, which was the working distance. We then used a pen and drew dots around the top, bottom, left, and right edge of the circle. We then connected the dots to create a circle for each pair of loupes. This was the only way we could think of to measure how wide the field of view for each set of loupes was. We found the field of view for Oroscoptic and Univet to be around 9.5 centimeters and Bryant around 10 centimeters.
This means when you look through the Bryant loupes, you will end up seeing a wider arch of teeth.
Truthfully, with both of these tests, we didn't feel like the difference between the loupes were that significant. They all had very good numbers and none of them left us wanting more. Univet edged forward slightly in depth of focus and Bryant edged forward with their field of view.
To test the overall clarity, we both spent some time looking at the same tooth model and also the same grid on the laptop. The reason we looked at the grid was because it has straight lines and can show us if there's any distortion. This was also the only way we could test for edge-to-edge clarity. In this category, we both found that the Univet loupes had the best clarity. They were clear and sharp from edge to edge, and there was no distortion of the straight lines at all.
The Oroscoptic and the Bryant loupes were both very sharp and clear in the middle of the images, but where they fell slightly short was around the edges of the circle. The Oroscoptic has a very slight fisheye lens effect, especially around the edges of the circle. This means the lines don't look as straight and there's a very slight distortion. The Bryant doesn't have this distortion at all, but is a bit blurry around the edge of the circle. But honestly, both of these things are very hard to notice, and you might only notice them if you swap out between the loupes constantly. When you're working with loupes, you're only really looking at the middle of the circle anyways, so these points are not very significant. But if you had to pick, definitely the Univet does have the better optics in our opinion.
Next, we'll be covering the light. You can see on the screen here that Univet's light is the one on the left, Oroscoptic is the one in the middle, and Bryant is the one on the right. There's quite a bit to consider when it comes to the light. We compared the brightness, the color accuracy, the evenness, the power setting, and even the convenience. In terms of pure brightness, Oroscoptic came out on top, followed by Univet. That was actually quite surprising, with the Oroscoptic's light being the wireless one and the Univet's one being a wired light.
That said, it doesn't always mean the brighter the better. You want something which is also color accurate. From what we experienced, Univet had the most even white light from edge to edge with a very thin, unnoticeable blue ring around the light. Oroscoptic had a blue hue in the center which became unevenly weaker towards the edges and had a fuzzy yellow to red to blue ring at the edges. Bryant had the slightly weaker light of the three, but definitely had more evenness compared to the Oroscoptic. It also had a blue ring around the edges, which was more noticeable than the Univet, but much less noticeable than the Oroscoptic.
Another thing that we noticed was that when we were comparing the Oroscoptic light to the Univet light, we noticed that with the Univet light, the gingivae and the tissue looked more saturated and more lifelike compared to the Oroscoptic. We think this is because the Oroscoptic light on this pair of loupes has a slight blue tinge, as it's measured at 6500 Kelvin. However, Oroscoptic has since released a new true color light, which is measured at 5700 Kelvins, which is the same as the Univet and the Bryant. This color temperature of the light is much closer to natural daylight, and so if you're getting a new pair of Oroscoptic loupes now, this shouldn't be a problem.
In terms of the power settings, we tested everything on the strongest options available. Univet has 5 power settings, whereas the other two have 2 settings. Having 5 power settings seems like a waste at first, but actually I do use the weaker setting when I'm working with composite. I prefer it to using the orange filter because I feel like I can see a lot more, and because it's weaker, I still have enough working time with my composite.
All the lights were pretty easy to use, but if we're nitpicking, Oroscoptic oroscoptic was the easiest to control by tapping the sides of the frame. Univet was the most fiddly because it's in your pocket and you have to find the right button, and then by the time you press it, sometimes it might take a little bit longer. Bryant is somewhere in between because you have to reach it over your back to change it, but really that wasn't too hard.
Finally, the advantage Univet and Bryant have over the oroscoptic is that they have an indicator which tells you how much battery you have left. Whereas with oroscoptic, you have to deal with the anxiety of not knowing if your battery is going to run out mid-procedure. Again, this isn't the worst thing because you can take a minute to quickly change the batteries. But if you run out of battery mid-procedure, the magnetic battery on the Bryant loupes is much easier and quicker to change because you can even keep your loupes on and your nurse can change it for you. But with the oroscoptic one, you have to take the loupes off, take off your gloves, unscrew the cap to replace the batteries, and then you have to put on a new pair of gloves, which might be difficult now because your hands are sweaty. I know this sounds like I'm being over the top, but this is generally what happens in real life and it's something you have to consider, and it has happened to us before.
One final little thing I wanted to say about the light is the build quality. I love that the light for the oroscoptic is fully built in. It's literally completely wireless, whereas the wire that Univet has is a little bit annoying in the way that it's held onto the arm of the frame with an extra piece of spirally rubber. Bryant also has a similar wire running along the arm of the frame, but it's held by two little rubber bands, so it doesn't look or feel as messy. And I know I'm really being extra now, but the way the filter flips up on the Bryant light feels the nicest because it's magnetic. It's almost addictive to keep flipping it.
So overall, taking everything into consideration, Univet has the best light output, but if you take into account convenience, that's where the wireless nature of the Bryant and oroscoptic shine. We know that Univet also has a wireless light, which we haven't had a chance to test, but taking into consideration that we both felt that the Univet loupes were a bit heavy on the nose, I wouldn't want to put a wireless light on top of the frame, making it even heavier.
So now what's our final verdict? Out of the 3 loupes we tested, if you want the absolute best optics and best light, go for the Univet loupes. But be aware you're potentially compromising on comfort and convenience depending on the frame and nose piece. If you want the most comfortable pair of loupes with good optics and a good light, go with Bryant. And if you want the safe option with good optics and a good light at a good price because you get student discount, go with oroscoptic.
This is where we genuinely think there isn't one perfect set of loupes. You need to find out what matters to you and go for the company which has that for you. This could be optics and light, or it could be comfort and convenience, or it could be price that matters to you the most.
And of course there are other loupe brands out there, but we hope this video gave you a good general idea of what to loop for when you go to test out loupes for yourself. Make sure you meet as many reps as possible and try out as many loupes as you can before you make a purchase.
And again, to make sure you guys are getting the best deals possible, check out the links in our description to get in touch with your local reps. As I said before, some of these will be providing unique discounts just for you guys, so make sure you mention 2 dentists when you speak to them.
Thank you guys so much for making it this far in the video. If you guys found it helpful, then make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and make sure to check out our other content too, which you might also find useful. We'll be making other loupes and product videos, so keep an eye out for them, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Bye!